Adventure and new friends are what awaits you in Starfleet, the world's largest Star Trek fan club. Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association, is celebrating its 45th anniversary, and with over 4,000 members in 75 countries, it offers camaraderie, educational and philanthropy opportunities, and a unique membership experience modeled on the Starfleet organization from the TV shows and movies. To start your adventure today, visit www.sfi.org.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Future Imperfect. I'm your captain, Mike the Birdman Dobb, but I'm not alone across this intrepid trek across the stars. I'm joined by my very own XO,
Steve Megatron Phillips.
And it feels good to be back here on Future Imperfect, obviously brought to you by SFI.org, Starfleet, the world's largest Star Trek online fan club. And speaking of that, you guys are probably wondering, where the hell have you guys been? Well, as we stated in our last show, we've been kind of in kind of dry dock, kind of looking at the enormity of the shows that we want to take on. And I kind of got some inspiration from watching, I think it was Trekkies or Trekkies 2, the documentaries that were done by Denise Crosby. And they come across the two people who had their own radio show, basically podcasting before it was podcasting, called Talking Trek. And I realized we don't necessarily have to stick to talking about Star Trek all the time, which is kind of an advantage. I mean, as long as we can tie it into Star Trek somehow, some way, this might give us a little more kind of leeway. Because, well, me and Steve just had a kid a little while ago.
Yes.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you. And
that means a lot of our time is very busy. I mean, I myself, by the time this show comes out, which should be Tuesday, February 4th, 5th, whatever. I'm actually going to be on a television set in the next couple of weeks, and I'm planning shoots and have some stuff in my professional life to take care of. So I'm really busy, but that doesn't mean we're not going to start talking Star Trek. No. Because originally we wanted to watch Star Trek, the animated series, which is a cartoon that ran, I think in the, 70s, Steve, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And we kind of decided, with the big news that happened a couple of weeks ago, obviously with Star Trek and the Darkness director J.J. Abrams getting his hands on Star Wars 7, that this kind of opens up a whole new can of worms for us to talk about. So, in honor of today's episode, we're not going to have any LCAR segment. We're just going to have a very free-flowing discussion, which we very much invite you guys to be a part of. You can reach us at feedback@thisweekingeek.net, subject line Future Imperfect, or our voicemail line of 817-717-7202. And we're going to talk about, basically, sci-fi franchises that maybe need a reboot or a relift to them, kind of like how Abrams is likely going to do something quite spectacular with Star Trek. I mean, like he already has done. And what is he going to do with Star Wars? And, there's a few other properties that I want to talk about, too, that have not necessarily gotten the love and respect I think they need these days. So I guess, Steve, where do we want to start this discussion?
I guess we'll start out with kind of an overview of some of the, well, for one, flip-flopping of Abrams over doing Star Wars and kind of jumping between Star Trek and Star Wars. And then from there, I think we should head over to some of the other sci-fi or lost sci-fi programs of the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of sci-fi on television right now. I mean, there's a lot of supernatural type stuff, like Being Human. I think Ripper has some stuff in it. I think that's what it's called. And, Supernatural, of course, being the really big one. Fringe just ended, and I would consider that more sci-fi than, say, supernatural elements to it. So it's just one of these times where I think sci-fi is kind of going through a huge change right now. And with Abrams taking on two of the largest sci-fi franchises out there, I kind of wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah, especially with him, because he's done many successful things and many that have flopped. Between doing Lost, doing the reboot of Star Trek, which he brought back from the dead. If it weren't for this man, we wouldn't have Trek today, or at least not in the sense that we know it now. And he's had like Alcatraz and some of these other shows that he's kind of headlined that have kind of gone by the wayside. So it's kind of a hit or miss on whether he's going to do this justice or not. But I think why not? If you're going to have somebody that knows the sci-fi and kind of more of the practical approaches to it, you might as well give a guy that has an idea about how all that stuff a chance.
Yeah, because I find when you give Abrams something really concrete, not necessarily his own stuff. I mean, because I, for example, wanted Cloverfield to be awesome. It kind of sucked. And I very much respected what he did in 2009 with like Star Trek, but I didn't like Alias, which is a show he also did. He did Lost too, didn't he?
Yes, he was, yeah.
And Lost, I liked. So, like you said, it's a lot of hit and miss with this guy. Super 8 was also pretty badass. So, I don't know. Someone on Kotaku, and you can find this on YouTube as well, look up J.J. Abrams' fan-cut Star Wars trailer, or something like this. And it very much demonstrates what the films may look like, because Abrams has a very distinct style of editing and a very distinct style of directing, and if just the way that the trailers are cut on YouTube, this fan really friggin' nailed it. And I gotta say, I'm excited for the big set pieces of these upcoming movies that he'll get to do, whether he does episode 8 and 9, who knows. But I don't know whether Star Wars can be a pure action movie when you really think about it. Because, I mean, even the prequels, there was enough character stuff in there to, you know, they weren't just something was happening all the friggin' time. Excuse me, I've still got a flu. And I don't know if we got what he did with, say, Star Trek as opposed to, say, something like Super 8. I might be more okay with it. I want to know when his movies are going to be set. And that's something that I worry about because in Star Wars, there's the established expanded universe, and Lucas has signed off on a vast majority of it. So if he follows the continuity of the books, the first story to be told happens like 20 minutes after Return of the Jedi, and it's called The Truce at Bakura, if I'm not mistaken. And basically it involves these alien creatures who find a way to trap a person's consciousness inside of a droid via a process called entekment. And it's stupid, and the book was so hard to get through. Or does he go into the new Jedi Order, which, you know, Luke is older along with everybody else. And the Jedi are coming back. There's the Imperial Remnant, but there's also things like the Yuzon Vong, who are these alien creatures who want to destroy all life or something like that. Or do you go into the Legacy era, way in the future, with the descendant of Skywalker? Like, I think his name is Cade, I think. I've got the first book somewhere. The Sith have come back, and, you know, it's Star Wars far future, quote-unquote. Or do you do something like Knights of the Old Republic? Because that's set at 5,000 years before shit happened. So, I don't know where he's going to go.
I think the direction that they want to go, especially from some of the ramblings between, or speaking ofs from Lucas with Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, some of the rumblings going around is that they're going to do 7 and they're going to have it take place many, many years later, picking up with Han, Leia, and Luke while they're training Luke and Leia's kids. Is I guess the direction they want to go with, like, a female Jedi daughter of Han and Leia.
Yeah, and I think that's supposed to be Janna, Jason, and Anakin in the expanded universe. Those are the 3 kids that they do end up having.
Yeah, and I think that the way that they want to go with it is that, and I've heard also rumblings about them killing off Solo, or possibly in this film, and kind of having Luke kind of staying with it for a little bit. So it's possible we might get more of that, and but I hope that JJ can manage to. I mean, he's with Star Trek. He's shown that he can do character. Kind of giving more flesh to the characters than what we got in 20 years of history almost.
See, one of the things that I'm kind of worried about, I think this movie's about 10 years too late. Maybe even 15. I think the time to do episode 7 would have been in the 90s. And the only reason I say that is because Mark Hamill was still dashing enough to do his own physical work. Harrison Ford was still doing movies like Air Force One and stuff like that, and K-19 Widowmaker. And I'm trying to think of what else. And I don't know whether Carrie Fisher was in a good place in the 90s, so maybe she wouldn't necessarily have been involved. I think the problem is, I mean, isn't like Harrison pushing 70 or something?
He's in his 70s.
That's in fucking sane.
And Mark Hamill's in his mid 60s, and I think Carrie Fisher's also in that realm.
And I don't know. I mean, it's not that I don't want to see them involved in the project. Don't get me wrong at all. I mean, Mark Hamill can now pull off the Obi-Wan role, which, eventually he does in the books when he establishes it with his Jedi Praxum he establishes on Yavin. So I'm okay with that. But just with Han and Leia being so old, I just don't see them being feisty, go-get-em grandma and grandpa fighting evil in the Millennium Falcon. And depending on where they set these new movies, Chewbacca's dead. He has a moon dropped on him. You don't come back from that. So, I mean, it would be kind of kick-ass if they had characters like, say, Mara Jade, who becomes Luke's wife. I think she's really... Yeah, she's younger than Luke. She's fucking hot. She's a redhead. And, I don't know, just... But then again, given what Abrams has done, I think he'll probably take the established EU stuff and churn it his own way, which will then establish a new line of EU for Star Wars. And I think that's a good thing and a bad thing, because good thing is if you don't like a story that happened in the EU, now it can be considered a what if. Or for the bad thing, it kind of screws up over 20 years of established history, because a lot of the expanded universe stuff came out of the West End Games role-playing stuff, and they just filled it in, and Lucas was like, yeah, sure, whatever, it works. And only with major decisions did you ever have to go to George himself to say, can I do this? And he would say yes or no. So obviously, now that Star Wars has been sold off to Disney, that brings off something else. What's going to happen with that? So it's going to be interesting to see where this all goes.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure quite how I feel about it with... I mean, I love them both. Obviously, I like Trek more than I like Star Wars, but I like them in a different kind of light. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there, as far as I'm concerned, with Abrams doing both, just because I don't feel that they should have their hands dipped in both pots.
Yeah, I'm very much of the same way. I mean, with Star Trek, it fulfills a different need for me in pop culture. Like, it fulfilled the intellectual, but also the excitement, and it basically got me towards more realistic possibilities, I guess, as much as you can make people exploring space realistic. I got more intellectually, whereas Star Wars satisfied that adventure element. I mean, they're dashing across the galaxy, hopping on speeder bikes with lightsabers, and, all sorts of crazy shit that we're used to seeing. With Star Trek, across all the films, outside of the newest Abrams one, the most exciting thing that happened involving vehicles was where Picard took that dune buggy in Nemesis. And I don't know, Star Trek did something different. I felt it was more character driven, whereas Star Wars was more about the journey, so to speak. I mean, because when you think about it, how much did you really know about Luke and Leia? You knew what their basic goals were, but with Picard and Riker, you had years to build upon the history. Or years to build upon Kirk and why does he do this? Why does he mourn at this particular moment, etc., etc. And even with the new Star Trek, you got enough character development that you cared. Because seeing Kirk grow up in Iowa, how he got into the fights in the bar, you really got a chance to know who he was and how he was very unsure of his ability to command, obviously rising to the task, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know how I feel this is going to go. But we could debate Star Wars and Star Trek all day.
Yeah, we've done that before.
Which is something we should probably do at some point on this show. Obviously, that's in the back pocket for a show if we ever truly get desperate for a topic. So one of the other things that we've kind of realized working here on Future Imperfect is, well, before Abrams came along, Star Trek was, if there's no other way to put it, it was dead. Enterprise ended back in 2004. There was a couple of comic books, a couple of books coming out. Maybe a few video games, but nothing to put it in the public consciousness again. There was no Trek on TV. And the last couple of years, the last 10 years for sci-fi, I think have been really good, especially when you look at the reboot of, say, Battlestar Galactica and the thing that's going on right now, Blood and Chrome, which I haven't had a chance to check out yet. But I started talking with Steve over email over the last week or so, and we started discussing, well, what happened to some of these other franchises? Because let's look back to the 90s. The 90s, there was so much sci-fi on TV. You could not escape it. And now, it's just, what do we got left? We got Fringe. Or, no, Fringe is done. What's left? Warehouse 13 is done. Eureka's done.
It seems like people have kind of gone the way of more or less the stupid programming. Because, and I'm not trying to say, that people are stupid. If you think I said that, then send me hate mail, steve@geekcastradio.com. But I feel like television has gotten really dumb over the last 10 years because of reality TV shows. Not saying that some of them aren't halfway decent, but most of them are just batshit stupid. And they've pretty much replaced any kind of written sitcoms, dramas, sci-fi, action, adventure, anything that you can think of. It's pretty much just replaced everything. And I feel that sci-fi was the most intellectual and something that you kind of had to pay attention to.
Yeah, it wasn't TV you could watch and do the dishes at the same time or do a crossword puzzle. You're right. It's something you very much had to pay attention to. And you look at television in the 90s, for example, The X-Files, let's talk about that, and Chris Carter. When the show wasn't featuring on the supernatural stuff, more the sci-fi government conspiracy type stuff, you had to pay attention because there were little hints in every episode that involved the overarching storyline of the conspiracy and purity control, etc., that tied in, and you could pick up on it. And things that may happen in an inconsequential episode may not pick up until much later. Now, one show that has really caught on for sci-fi that's really, I think, bringing the genre back in a lot of ways is the reimagined Doctor Who. And that started back in 2005.
Which I have to say, to kind of butt in, I mean, I've never seen it. I do have it on my Netflix queue, but I just haven't had a chance to watch it.
It's one of those shows, you got to pick the right entry point or you're not going to get it at all. Which is something that happened to me when I started. I started right from the very beginning. Now, I liked Christopher Eccleston, who plays the Ninth Doctor. Big fan of his work. Loved him in 28 Days Later. Loved him as Destro in G.I. Joe. As dumb as that role was, he's still fucking Destro. And it's kind of grown on me through the David Tennant years, the Matt Smith years, and who knows what's going to happen after that, and through all the various different companions. If I had to say one episode for you, Steve, to start with an episode in season 3 called Blink. Because it barely features the Doctor in it at all.
Okay.
It gives this wild sense of how strange the stories can be while completely gripping you. And it's one of those shows that it's very episodic, and the fact that you don't necessarily need to see all of them to get what's going on. Now, that has changed in kind of later years, especially in season 6, where they have this overarching story of a character that's known as River Song, or as I call her. I hate this fucking character in Sci-Fi. I don't like her. I've got my own reasons. Hell, we can talk about that at some point. When you watch some Doctor Who, we'll talk Doctor Who. Maybe I'll bring Ryan over on this show, because I know he's a big Whovian. But that's a show I'm very glad has brought back a lot of people talking. In fact, even Star Trek has crossed over with Doctor Who in the last couple of years.
Yeah, in the comics.
Yeah, and I never read them. I want to so bad. I know there's a couple of trade paperbacks, so maybe when I get paid next week, I'll maybe order those off of like Amazon or something. So that's a show that's been very important for Sci-Fi. But looking back to the 90s, like I said, X-Files, another show that I always wanted to get into but never did was something called Farscape.
Yeah, I've kind of caught bits and pieces here or there, but I've never been quite sure what the hell it's all about.
I know it's got Muppets.
It's produced by the Jim Henson Productions and Hallmark Entertainment.
And I know there was a huge box set that came out, I think it was 2 years ago. And
sounds about right.
And it was weird. It was produced by A&E, I think. And it was the entire series on Blu-ray. And it was something like $200. But totally friggin' worth it when you consider how expensive Blu-rays are to begin with. Yeah, that's all I know. It was about an astronaut who fell through like a wormhole or something, and he's lost halfway across the galaxy, and there was like a shit ton of movies involved in it. And that kind of brings me to the next show, which I started getting into in the last couple years, thanks to my friend Lorenzo. It's written by J. Michael
Straczynski.
That's it. Or something similar. And the guy who's wrote Spider-Man and a bunch of other cool crap actually wrote a textbook on film, on like how to write it and all this other crazy stuff. A series called Babylon 5, which is a story about a space station in the middle of nowhere, where basically all these governments come together and they have representatives there, so all the species can start working together.
I remember bits and pieces of that. Like, I didn't really watch it, but I caught a little bit of it here or there. And you had freaking Tron in there.
Yeah, you had Bruce Boxleitner. You had just a lot of really good actresses.
You had Star Trek crossover people. You had, like, Chekhov show up a couple times.
Yeah, Walter Coing. You also had, I'm trying to remember her name, Pamela Tallman or Stillman, something like that. Pamela. Either way, she was a woman who played Barbara in the remake of Night of the Living Dead that came out in the 90s. And she really owned that role. And I think she plays like a Psi-Corps officer. And the thing about Babylon 5 that I liked is it was like Star Trek but more political. And yet you could have crazy adventures. I mean, in the first couple episodes, there's this creature called the Soul Hunter, and he comes to Babylon 5, and there are these creatures called the Mimbari. I'm fucking terrified of this guy, because he literally traps your soul before you die, and he's sent to watch over it. And yet, in the middle of all this going on, they're talking about trade negotiations, or there's this other race that may be screwing over these like other guys, and there's always something going on. And even though it's confined to the space station most of the time, it's different, and very much kind of set the precursor for what would follow with like Deep Space Nine later on. But they also had really cool characters. One of them I really liked is the security officer, Garibaldi. There's this other guy, he's a Centauran named Londo, basically the guy with the really weird hair. If you think of Babylon 5, you think of this guy. And it was just really, really well written. And I know there's a bunch of movies for it too. There's a spin-off series called Crusader, which I actually started watching that first because it was on before Star Trek Voyager in the 90s on my local television station. And that's how I got into more sci-fi, was, because there would always be these great blocks of programming on in the afternoons. And I know you mentioned a show that had Kevin Sorbo in it. I can't remember what it's called, though.
It's Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda.
Now, what was the plot of that one?
It was... I'm trying to think. I haven't seen it in years. I know it went from the year 2000 to 2005. It has to do with... It's set thousands of years in the future, and revolves around some kind of a commonwealth, kind of a monarchy, and you have humankind, you have multiple galaxies, you have the Milky Way, the Triangulum, and the Andromeda, and it's just it's kind of like Star Trek in a sense. But it's almost it's almost a little bit more political. It's you've got different kind of events that go on. You have an artificial intelligence character on the ship, as in the ship's computer. Kind of reminds you of the holographic Doctor in a sense, because it's almost like the ship is alive in a sense.
I think it was played by Lexa Doig, wasn't it?
I think so.
And she was in Jason X, and that's where I know her from. But anyway, continue.
But they have, instead of like warp drive, they have slipstream, and they're faster than light, kind of like Star Trek. There's tons of solar systems. There's tons of political stuff between the classic Commonwealth, and them trying to restore it, and there being the new. It's kind of like almost Star Wars meets Babylon 5 meets Star Trek.
See, it's a show I always wrote off because it had Kevin Sorbo.
Honestly, I thought it was going to be like kind of shitty for what I did see, but I feel that between that and Hercules, those are the only two things that are worth watching that he's in. So I mean, I would say to give it a shot anyway.
I'm
kind of trying to think of why some of these old shows just kind of, haven't had any kind of revival. I mean, maybe Andromeda didn't have a huge following, but you look at Babylon 5, you look at
Battlestar Galactica.
You look at there was. I mean, shoot. I've even heard rumblings of like an X-Files revival with new people and so on. So I mean,
see, now that's shit I can get behind.
But it just depends on how they want to kind of jump behind it.
See, there were a couple of shows that came out in the 90s, and they were sci-fi, but they were very goofy, lighthearted sci-fi with occasionally some serious elements to it.
Quantum Leap.
I was thinking more Lex and Cleopatra 2525, which is, okay, I'll admit, it's a stupid fucking show, but it has Gina Torres from Firefly. Hell, there's something we can mention. I mean, it's got a long life on DVD, but we'll talk about Firefly in just a moment. And it was just a goofy show where she was the reincarnation of literally Cleopatra, but she was like an idiot. And she fought with lasers and something, and it was a really weird show, but it had a really catchy theme song, and it was hot chicks kicking ass against robots, and it was a fun show for me, and I just remember that being on in the 90s. Once again, I remember they would show Andromeda, Cleopatra, Lex, and Earth 2 in a block on my local television stations. You cannot get that. Even the Sci-Fi channel, you can't get that, which is depressing. Even in Canada, the Space Channel doesn't have all that much solid blocks of super programming that isn't like Star Trek or whatever. And obviously the big pink elephant in the room, which I just mentioned, Firefly. Why Fox canceled that is beyond me. And then you look how successful Serenity was in terms of at least it made its budget back, and it's had a huge following over the years, and I guess it suffers from, anything Joss Whedon does outside of movies now seems to get canceled in some capacity. And that kind of brings me to other sci-fi that's been canceled over the years. One of my shows I wish that had never ended, or at least ended on a much better note. I'm probably going to get some hate mail for this, so feedback at thisweekingeek.net or Mike at thisweekingeek.net. Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Fantastic show. There were even moments where I was genuinely moved by it. And yet, 2 seasons and then out. Or Dollhouse, 2 seasons, then out.
Were those both on Fox?
Yep.
See, Fox is notorious for canceling stuff before it even really gets its feet off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, they got those ones. I remember they did Space Above and Beyond, which was a show that came out in I think around 97, 98, remember.
If, like, for instance, Fox has had other shows that they've canceled, like the Sarah Connor Chronicles was, a surefire good show. Didn't they have Dollhouse?
Yep.
At one point?
Yep.
Yeah. Wasn't, I'm trying to think of some other ones. They had Terra Nova, which was an interesting concept, and that didn't last very long.
Yep, 1 season, which you can view that on Netflix if you're so inclined.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to see some of these shows just kind of go by the wayside just because the stations, and that's something with broadcasting companies in kind of today's world, though. You look at all these different stations, Fox, NBC, CBS, ABC, they don't really give anything a chance. They give it a couple episodes and then they kind of shit can it, or they give it a season and then it's kind of left abruptly.
Yeah, and it always comes down to money, which is really unfortunate. And one of the things that I just kind of want to mention, I mean, if we're talking about just sci-fi television, think about sci-fi cartoons as well. One of the most recent ones to get shit canned was Tron Uprising.
See, that's just sad. I liked that show when I got to see it. I mean, granted, it wasn't. It was on what, Disney Channel?
Yep, or Disney XD or something.
Yeah. See, the problem with some of those things is, and I guess this is getting again into the network thing. If you're one of those people that don't have those digital cable stations or can't afford them, you're already screwing the show that you might like.
Yeah, because a lot of local networks, or at least over-the-air broadcasters or regular TV stations, they no longer have a block of programming dedicated towards children. I mean, I don't even think Fox has a Saturday morning anymore, do they?
No, no. But some of the stations are starting to bring them back to some capacity. Mm-hmm. Like you look at Nickelodeon, they've got, Turtles, and they've got some, they're trying to revive some of the old 80s kind of vibe. And then you've got like the Hub, they're with Transformers. They can G.I. Joe, unfortunately. And then, you look at some of these other, there's not really much of Saturday morning cartoons anymore. And that to me is just sad in general, because now that I have a son, I want him to grow up on some of the stuff, even if it's a modern take of whatever it is I grew up on, and it's just not there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why sci-fi sometimes gets so hard to get behind. Because like I said, you look at the success of Battlestar Galactica, multiple movies, the series lasted 4 seasons, 2 spin-offs, Caprica and Blood and Chrome. You look at Doctor Who. Look how much that has invaded pop culture in the last fucking 7 years.
Well, honestly, in the last 2 to 3 years, I mean, if you look at it, really, people have been paying more attention to that. And I guess it even kind of goes with Star Trek, too. I mean, you look at 2009, that's pretty much about the turning point where sci-fi started coming back into everyone's lives and into the public, pop culture, just in general. I mean, that's about the time that everything, you had Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars kind of has been kind of off and on again, but
yeah, I mean, you've got the Clone Wars computer animated series, which you should all check out. It's fucking awesome. Yeah,
that's really the only thing keeping Star Wars alive right now is that cartoon. And honestly, I mean, it's, in my opinion, I think it's kind of better than the films, but just because the writing, and you get a variety of characters and a
you
lot
get
longer.
More time to you get more time to develop it. I mean, one show that I don't know how to frame this correctly, because I like the show and I don't like the show at the same time. Can you guess where I'm going?
Maybe.
It's a sitcom, and it really brought us and geek culture and nerds right into the forefront right now. And that's The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yes.
Now, when The Big Bang Theory really hit it big, I mean, yeah, nerd culture was still popular. I mean, we still had Spider-Man in theaters, we had Iron Man, we had, the superhero movies were still really hot. Nerd culture was starting to be really, really bankable. And I think they're in, like, their 6th season now, or 5th or 6th season.
I think it's 6.
Yeah, and just look at how much people emulate or talk about nerd culture now. And it surprises me that this is not filtering more into the networks. Now, I don't know this person because I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of Netflix or stuff that I know I want to watch, like, say, Walking Dead. Is Revolution still on?
It is. The unfortunate part is, I mean, for one, let me get into a little bit of background on that. It's created by Eric Kripke.
Oh, the guy behind Supernatural.
Yeah, and after he left as kind of showrunner of Supernatural, I mean, he's still on there as a producer, but he's not really there from day to day. He went over and created Revolution with the director of the first 2 Iron Man films and J.J. Abrams. The only problem with this show I can see, and it's a good show, the thing is, Abrams, in a lot of his TV since Lost, seems to drag out the seasons. Mm-hmm. So they take seemingly forever. Like Alcatraz, I thought that was going to be a great show, and it was, until they wouldn't get to the damn point. And that's kind of a thing with Eric Kripke, too, because Supernatural is doing the same thing. Which, again, that kind of neither here nor there. But with Revolution, I feel like it's going to get canceled, only because they stopped airing it in mid-November for the Christmas break, and it's not coming back until the end of March.
Oh.
So the mid to end of March. So I feel that's way too long. It should be a month max. And even if you're going to take a week off here or there, it needs to be consistent. So I feel like that show is going to die fairly quick when it comes back, because it's been out of the limelight for about 5 months. Yeah,
and that's really unfortunate, because I thought that was a really cool idea for a show. Like you said, they got Kripke and Favreau involved in it. So, I don't know. I mean, I want Sci-Fi to come back on television and really hardcore. I would love for us to have on television, even if it's on a premium channel, I want the equivalent of a Breaking Bad or a Walking Dead or a Sons of Anarchy. Basically, I want an AMC sci-fi series that is critically acclaimed, has people on the edge of their seat every week, and has people coming back. I mean, when Walking Dead leaves for X amount of months, we're all upset. But we're okay with it because we know it's going to be awesome when it comes back. For example, Breaking Bad. There's only 4 episodes left, maybe 5, I think, when it comes back next July. They aired 4 episodes last season, and the rest will be concluded this year. And I know it's a really small number. I'm probably getting that number slightly wrong. But I want Sci-Fi to have something like that. I mean, engage me somehow. I mean, there's so many cool properties that could be adapted to Sci-Fi and just really kind of get it going. I mean, if we're not going to get a Star Trek on television, which I know they're really hesitant to do it now because of the JJ film franchise.
And not even just that. I think that Paramount and CBS don't want to do it on TV because not only the J.J. Abrams, but I feel like they don't want to do it because Enterprise kind of flopped out towards the end.
Yeah, and I like. There's no reason for people to be scared of that now. I mean, that was like, well,
that was 2005 when the show got canceled, and it's. I think that it's come full circle at this point. I think people are ready for it again. I think that now would be the time to do it, and I think that instead of having all these network shows launch them, I think they need to create a new sci-fi channel, and I think that it needs to feature all of these shows. You know, to some capacity, having them as reruns, but they also need to recreate some of these
for the modern times with brand new storytelling and have some new original shows.
Yeah, like I would love to see a rebooted Babylon 5 or a continuation of what happened afterwards. Or, you know, maybe, like you said, redo the X-Files. Another show that I loved, I don't know if you call it sci-fi, but it had sci-fi elements to it, was The Lone Gunman. Fantastic show, died way before its time. And yeah, just reboot some of these things, or do what Netflix is doing. They're financing Arrested Development Season 4. There's a new series right now called House of Cards with Kevin Spacey. He can't be cheap. So
No.
There's got to be, like, there's money there. There are intelligent writers out there. There are, like, fuck, man. Like, Star Trek. Look at the history. Look how many episodes won major awards or are critically acclaimed for one reason or another. There's no reason why we can't have something really awesome and, you know, have it be respected. And if it has to go via premium channel or whatever, I think people are willing to pay it. I mean, especially with the way content delivery is going now, with it being more digital, more so than any other time that I can think of, it's about time. It's about time that, you know, we take the risk or give people the money. Like, I know there's a bunch of fan projects going on now, like Star Trek Renegades got funded. There's Star Trek of Gods and Men that got funded a couple years ago. Like, there's money.
Well, yeah, and the sad thing is it's the actors from the shows that are reviving it because there's not going to be a station that wants to pick it up.
Yeah.
Which is sad and unfortunate because the fans and the actors really want to be in their franchises again.
Yeah, I mean, it's not them saying, oh, I want another shot at glory. No, they believe in what they're doing. Now, I'm sure there's probably one or two that are doing it for the money, but I think because we are riding this super high wave of nerd popularity right now, like, now is the time. See how well Star Trek does. Star Trek in the Darkness, the last one made like $500 million, so I think it did okay. Star Trek 2, I imagine, is going to do better. The new Star Wars movie. I mean, I didn't expect them to do a third trilogy. I think, nope, they're done. We're going to get Clone Wars. We might get a standalone movie if we're lucky.
Well, and I did hear about them wanting to do it, and I heard, you know, rumors all over the place, but then I kind of chalked it up as that's just fanboy rumors, and then lo and behold, there we are. You know, it was again, it's a welcome addition to the fandoms and everything, but I just hope that they do it right.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that we really want to impart from this conversation. We're in the right position. The time is right now. But if it's not good, it's not going to last. So hopefully we should see something good on television. I'm hoping soon, because the only thing I'm really looking forward to is the J.J. Abrams S.H.I.E.L.D. show. And I don't know when that's coming, off the top of my head. Now, you know what would make a really awesome sci-fi comic booky show that could work on network television?
What?
Judge Dredd.
That, actually, I really love that new movie, so honestly, that would be very, very, very cool.
Put that on HBO, because then you can get away with whatever violence you want. You can put whatever sex and whatever and language. There you go. Or if the rebooted RoboCop takes off, why not?
Yeah.
There was a RoboCop series in the 90s, and I thought it was okay. Kind of retarded at times, but I thought it was all right. You know, I mean, there's so much possibility, and the fuck you old white men in charge. Give me your money.
And honestly, I think there needs to be a geek uprising.
Yeah, I mean, we virtually rule Comic-Con. I mean, we rule network television. I mean, one of the most popular shows is Big Bang Theory.
I think we need to have a geek uprising at the conventions, at every Comic-Con, until we get our voices heard. And I think that there needs to be, to some capacity, a geek network run by actual geeks, not asshats.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, put someone like Will Wheaton in there. I'm serious. Put Will Wheaton, Felicia Day, Nathan Fillion, Joss Whedon.
People that are genuinely involved. They're for the fans. They're for themselves. I mean, that's obvious, but they love what they do.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's what you need.
Yeah, there's no reason it could not succeed. Attracting geek sponsors, not going to be hard.
And then hire you and me and the rest of TWiG and Geekcast Radio to work.
Yeah, there you go. We would run the online component for it. And see, that's what, because there is so much social media involved, I wish more people would take advantage to take to Twitter and say, hey, you should do this. I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's a pipe dream. Could it happen? Who knows? It's entirely possible. I just really hope it happens. So I guess, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this kind of new takeoff on Future Imperfect. I know we didn't talk a whole lot of Trek on this one, but like I said, I'm very much taking inspiration from from the Talking Trek ladies, where we you can tie anything you can into Star Trek, and it works. So, Steve, what do we want to talk about next time? I know we wanted to talk about the animated series, and that's only one season. Could we do that in about 2 weeks?
The animated series?
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
Okay, on next show, we will be talking about the long-awaited animated series episodes. We hope you guys have enjoyed this. Once again, call our voicemail line, 817-717-7202. Just mention you're leaving the voicemail for Future Imperfect, or feedback at thisweekingeek.net, subject line Future Imperfect. So for This Week in Geek's Future Imperfect, we have been
Steve Megatron Phillips.
And I've been Mike the Birdman Dodd saying, live long and prosper.